The plastic grocery bag was heavy in my hand as I climbed the porch steps. The April wind in Blydendsburg was still biting, even though the calendar was stubbornly showing the middle of the month. The house greeted me with a strange silence. Usually at this time of day, Christine had the TV on full blast, and her mother Patricia was rattling dishes in the kitchen, preparing the next meal that no one asked for. The key wouldn't turn in the lock. I tried again, thinking I was just holding the bag awkwardly. The metal creaked, but the lock wouldn't budge. A strange feeling crawled up into my chest, the same one I'd felt 2 years ago when the doctor had told me about Ellen's diagnosis. Something was wrong. I took a step back and looked carefully at the door. The keyhole looked different, newer, shiny nickel where the worn brass used to be. I pressed the bell. Footsteps were heard at the door almost immediately, which meant someone was home. The door swung open, and Christine appeared in her usual business suit, her hair in a tight bun. Behind her loomed Patricia, a woman in her 60s with a predatory look and permanently pinched lips. She was wearing a new dress, an expensive one, judging by the quality of the fabric. "Henry, come in. We need to talk," Christine said in the tone she used to announce layoffs at work. I stepped through the door, but something had changed dramatically in the familiar surroundings. There were folders with brightly colored logos on the coffee table and a new vase of artificial flowers next to it. Ellen's picture on the dresser was gone, the one of her smiling, holding a freshly plucked peony from her garden. In its place was a framed picture of some landscape. Even the air smelled different, some kind of chemical freshener instead of the usual lavender scent Ellen used to hang in the cabinets. I set the grocery bag on the floor by the door. "What's going on? Why doesn't the key fit?" Christina and Patricia looked at me with that special look I'd seen before, when they decided that Ellen had been in the hospital too long and should consider hospice care. I didn't listen to their advice then, and Ellen spent her last months at home where she was at ease, where she could see her garden and hear the birds singing in the morning. "We've made a decision," Christine began, sitting down in her chair as if she were conducting an important business meeting. "Wakrana, you can no longer live alone in this big house. It's not safe for someone your age." "What are you talking about?" Patricia stepped forward, her eyes shining with a kind of unhealthy enthusiasm. She always looked that way when she was discussing other people's misfortunes with her neighbors over the fence, reveling in the details of their woes. "Henry, darling, we're all genuinely worried about you. Last month you forgot to turn off the stove and almost started a fire, and last week the neighbors saw you looking for your keys in the bushes for half an hour. Those are very warning signs of dementia. I did forget to turn the stove off once, after I couldn't sleep all night thinking about the electric bill, which was getting bigger every month. And the keys fell into the bushes when I was carrying heavy bags from the store and caught my jacket on a branch." But in their mouths, these completely ordinary accidents sounded like a terrible medical diagnosis. "I feel fine and absolutely do not need anyone's care. Robert agreed with us," Christine lied without blinking an eye. "We discussed the situation at length and found a wonderful place. Pine Paradise is a state-of-the-art senior center. It has qualified medical staff around the clock, organized dietary meals, entertainment and leisure activities for people of your age and social circle. Robert left on a business trip 10 days ago and isn't due back until 2 weeks later. What could they seriously talk to him about? Communications in the wilderness where he went to install telecommunications equipment worked on an ad hoc basis. The last time we called was 4 days ago, and he didn't say anything about any nursing homes. In fact, he asked how things were going at home, and I said they were fine. Where is Robert now? I want to talk to him in person immediately. He's very busy with an important project right now," Christine said nonchalantly. "Henry, we've already decided and agreed on everything. Representatives from the center will come to pick you up tomorrow morning. You can pack the essentials, and we'll pack the rest carefully and deliver it to you later." The air in the room became thick and heavy, like before a summer thunderstorm. I slowly looked at the two women, comfortably seated in the living room of my house, the house I had built with my own hands 30 years ago, where my son had been born and raised, where my beloved wife had died. They were discussing my fate as calmly and businesslike as if they were planning the delivery of new furniture. "This is my home. I'm not going anywhere from here. Never." Patricia sighed deeply with deliberate regret, the same theatrical sigh she used to accompany her stories about neighbors in serious trouble. Henry, please don't complicate an already difficult situation. At your advanced age, stubbornly resisting necessary changes is not healthy or healthy. We are acting solely in your own best interests. My best interests? My voice was as hoarse and husky as when I had shouted at the indifferent doctors, demanding stronger painkillers for the dying Ellen. Who exactly gave you the right to solely decide what was best for me? Christine stood up gracefully and walked to the large window, which gave a sad view of the neglected garden where Helene had once lovingly grown her famous roses. Now it was nothing but weeds and young shoots. Christine had always considered gardening a waste of time and water. Henry, you're an intelligent and sensible man. Try to look at yourself in a completely sober way. The house is slowly but surely falling apart, and you're getting worse at basic housekeeping every day. And what happens if something really serious happens? You fall and break something? Feel bad with your heart? Who will help you in a timely manner? I've been successfully fixing complex electronics for 40 years. My hands are still pretty straight. I'll manage with the housekeeping too. Mom's absolutely right, Patricia intervened firmly, turning to her daughter. Henry, it really hurts us every day to see you slowly suffer alone. In a specialized center, you will finally find real peace and professional care from qualified medical staff. Peace. Ellen was also constantly promised this peace, first in the city hospital and then in an expensive private hospice. But there was no peace there. There were only faceless white walls, the pungent odor of hospital disinfection, and completely alien people in gowns, who obviously knew much more about the process of dying than about a full life. Have the locks been changed yet? I asked, though the answer was obvious. Only for your own safety. Christine nodded calmly. We just couldn't take any more risks. What if you accidentally forgot to lock the front door at night? I slowly looked around the living room with a thoughtful gaze. The massive coffee table I'd handcrafted from real oak when Robert was a clumsy teenager. A comfortable sofa, which my dear Helen had spent half a day painfully choosing in a huge furniture store, worrying whether it would match the color of the new curtains. A tall bookshelf with numerous volumes that we enjoyed reading aloud to each other on endless, cold winter evenings. I am emphatically not going anywhere. This is my own home, and I intend to live here until I die. Patricia's face instantly became stony and impenetrable, and in her cold eyes there was that familiar hard expression that I had always seen in her when anyone dared to openly contradict her elaborate plans. In such a case, we will unfortunately have to call in competent specialists who will professionally assess your current mental state. Such inappropriate and aggressive behavior at your advanced age is a very serious symptom of advanced senile dementia. The overt threat hung heavy in the steamy air of the room. I suddenly realized with terrifying clarity that they had thought and planned everything out in detail beforehand. As long as Robert was out of town, they had virtually carte blanche to take any and all drastic actions. And my only son had no idea what was going on in his parents' house. It was colder outside than I thought. It was an early April evening in Bladensburg, and the damp wind was blowing through my old jacket. I stood on the porch of my own house and didn't know what to do. My car keys were still inside, along with my papers and phone. Everything that made up my life was now on the other side of the new locks. Mildred Harris's house was across the street, and I could see the light in her windows. Mildred had lived here for 20 years. Ellen and I often exchanged gardening tips with her. If anyone could help me get in touch with Robert, it was her. I crossed the street and walked up to the porch. The bell echoed with a melodic trill somewhere in the back of the house. A minute later, the door opened, and Mildred appeared, a short woman in her 70s with kind eyes and gray hair neatly coiffed. Henry, what's the matter? You look upset. Mildred, I need help. I'm having trouble with my sister-in-law and I can't get into my house. Can I use your cell phone to get in touch with Robert? She frowned and stepped aside, inviting me in. Of course. Come in. What happened? I told her briefly about the locks, about the plans to send me to a nursing home, about Christina and Patricia claiming as if Robert had agreed. Mildred listened in silence, but her face grew darker and darker. It's outrageous, she said at last. There's a phone in the living room. I dialed Robert's number, but all I got was an automated message that the caller was out of range. I tried again and got the same result. No answer, I said to Mildred. The connection's bad up there in the mountains. What about his office? Maybe they'd know how to get in touch with him. I tried to remember the number of the company where Robert worked. Mildred brought the phone book, and we found the information. But the office was answered by an automated receptionist. The workday had ended 2 hours ago. Henry, what if we went to the police? Mildred suggested it. After all, you've been practically kicked out of your own home. I don't know. They have some paperwork, and Christine has power of attorney for certain things. I'm afraid the police will believe them over me. Mildred thought for a moment, then stood up resolutely. You'll stay with me tonight. Tomorrow we'll be sure to call Robert or go to his office. Thank you, Mildred. That's very kind of you. She made tea, and we sat in her cozy kitchen discussing the situation. Outside the window it was finally dark, and lights came on in the windows of my house. It was strange to see it from the outside, knowing that strangers were managing the inside. About 10 o'clock at night, the doorbell rang. Mildred looked at me in surprise. Visitors were rare at such a time. She went to open the door and I stayed in the kitchen, finishing my tea. Good evening. We're looking for Henry Coleman. We were told he might be here, I heard an unfamiliar male voice say. Who's asking for him? Mildred answered cautiously. The Shield Private Security Service. Mr. Coleman's family called us. There are concerns about his mental state. My heart sank. They weren't kidding. Christina and Patricia really brought the case to a close. I stepped out into the hallway. 2 men in dark jackets with security patches stood on the doorstep. One was tall and broad-shouldered, the other smaller, but he looked solid. Both had walkie-talkies hanging from their belts. Mr. Coleman? The tall one approached me. I'm James Crowell. This is my partner, David Turner. We've been asked to find you and make sure you're okay. Who asked you? Your sister-in-law, Mrs. Christine Coleman. She reported that you left the house in a state of emotional distress and might have harmed yourself or others. Mildred snorted indignantly. What nonsense. Henry is perfectly sane. It was his sister-in-law who changed the locks on his own house. Crowell shook his head politely but firmly. Ma'am, we don't interfere in family disputes. Our job is to make sure Mr. Coleman is safe and, if necessary, to escort him to a medical facility for evaluation. I don't need any evaluation, I said. I'm healthy and at a friend's house. I understand, sir, but according to the information we've received, you're showing signs of dementia. There was an attempt to break into someone's house tonight. Aggressive behavior. This is my house, my own house. Crowell and Turner looked at each other. Apparently, they interpreted my outrage as confirmation of Christine's aggressive behavior. Mr. Coleman, we're asking you to come with us voluntarily. The doctor will perform a simple examination, and if everything is normal, you can go home. And if I refuse? Then we'll have to use coercion. We have a temporary order to hospitalize you for medical evaluation. Crowell showed me some kind of document. I couldn't make out the fine text in the dim light of the hallway, but the seal looked official. Mildred grabbed my sleeve. Henry, don't agree to this. This is wrong. Ma'am, please don't interfere, Turner warned her. Sona, there may be legal consequences for obstructing an official order. I realized I was backed into a corner. If I resisted, they would use force, and then it would really look like inappropriate behavior. And Mildred could get hurt because of me. All right, I said quietly. I'll go willingly, but I want Mrs. Harris to contact my son and let him know what's going on. I will, Henry, Mildred promised, and I could hear the tears in her voice. I said goodbye to her and went outside. There was a white van with the logo of a security service parked at the curb. Crowell opened the back door, and I saw that the interior had been converted for human transportation soft seats, but bars on the windows. As we drove through the night streets of Bladensburg, I thought about how cleverly Christina had arranged everything. While I was trying to find help, she had already set in motion the mechanism for involuntary hospitalization. She must have presented the case that I was a danger to myself and others, that I was suffering from senile dementia, and the guards saw in front of them an agitated old man who insists that he has been kicked out of his own home, a classic case from their point of view. The minibus stopped outside a small hospital on the outskirts of town. A lighted sign read, Psychiatric Emergency Center. I'd never been to a place like this before, and I'd imagined them from movies, dark and ominous. But here everything looked ordinary. Clean corridors, fluorescent lighting, the smell of antiseptic. I was led into a small office where a young doctor in a white coat sat behind a desk. The name tag read, Dr. Andrew Simons. Good evening, Mr. Coleman. I realize it's been a difficult day. Tell me what happened. I told the whole story from the beginning, about changing the locks, about the plans to send me to a nursing home, about Robert being impossible to find. Dr. Simons listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions. I understand your situation, he said finally. But according to the information we've received from your family, you've been experiencing memory lapses, forgetfulness, and difficulty performing everyday tasks. That's a lie. I remember everything perfectly, and I'm doing my chores at home. The doctor conducted a short test. He asked me to name the current date, count from 100 to 80 in increments of 7, repeat a few words. I coped with all the tasks without difficulty. I don't see any cognitive impairment, Simons admitted, but a family conflict of this severity could be indicative of other problems. I recommend you stay here until morning for observation. Tomorrow we'll contact your son and review the situation. I had no choice. The nurse escorted me to a room with 2 beds. The second one was empty. I lay down on the hard mattress and stared at the ceiling for a long time, listening to a woman crying somewhere in the corridor and someone monotonously repeating the same phrase. In the morning, I was awakened by a knock on the ward door. During the night, I had hardly slept at all during the night. Every now and then, I woke up from the strange sounds in the corridor and thought about how to get out of this trap. The gray dawn light was streaming in through the window, promising a rainy day. Mr. Coleman, a middle-aged nurse with a tired face, entered the room. Dr. Simons wants to talk to you. I got dressed and walked into the same office I'd been in the day before. The doctor looked fresher than I felt, and on the desk in front of him was an open file folder of papers. Good morning, Henry. How'd you sleep? Not so good. Can I go home now? Simon shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I contacted your sister-in-law this morning. She confirmed your recent memory and behavioral problems. She also provided a medical note from your family doctor. What doctor? I haven't been to any doctor in the last 6 months. Dr. Phillips, it says here that you've been diagnosed with early signs of dementia and recommended for observation. I've never heard of Dr. Phillips. Christina clearly stopped at nothing to create the appearance of a medical reason for my isolation. This is bogus. I demand to be contacted by my son. We have tried, but Mr. Robert Coleman is on a business trip and unavailable. Your daughter-in-law has temporary power of attorney for medical matters. The walls of the office seemed to shrink. Christina had everything covered, even fake medical documents. And I was sitting here with no ID, no phone, no way to prove a point. I want out of here. I want out now. Unfortunately, that's not possible. Given the medical information and your condition, we recommend continued observation. Perhaps a transfer to a specialized facility should be considered. A nursing home. That's exactly what she wants. Dr. Simon shook his head sympathetically. Sakon, Henry, I know it's hard for you to accept change, but sometimes family knows best what an elderly person needs. I stood up and headed for the door. If you're not releasing me voluntarily, that's an unlawful imprisonment. Mr. Coleman, please don't make this any harder than it already is. But I was already out in the hallway. A nurse tried to stop me, but I passed her and headed for the exit. The guard at the entrance made a move to block the way, but Dr. Simons called out to him. Let him go. We can't hold him by force. I stepped outside and took a deep breath of fresh air. It was early morning, and the rain was drizzling in small drops. I didn't have money for the bus, but it was about 3 kilometers to my house. A good walk. I walked slowly, thinking about the situation. Christina acted quickly and decisively. In 124 hours, she changed the locks, called security, organized a fake medical certificate, and got me hospitalized. I was now officially listed as mentally ill. The police station was located in the center of Bladensburg, in an old brick building. It took me half an hour to get there on foot. I was met at the entrance by the officer on duty, a young man with a tired look. What can I do for you? I've been illegally kicked out of my own home. I want to file a report. The officer pointed to a chair at the counter. Have a seat. Tell me more about it. I told the whole story from the beginning, about changing the locks, about trying to force me into a nursing home, about forged documents. The officer listened, occasionally jotting something down in his notebook. I understand your frustration, sir, but this looks like a family conflict. Do you have the title deeds to the house? They were left in the house. My sister-in-law took all my papers. That complicates matters. Does your son support your wife's decision to move you? He's on a business trip and doesn't know what's going on. They lied about him agreeing. The officer's thinking, sir, you can apply, but without documentation and with medical reasons. You see, we've been approached before about your disappearance from the medical facility. Contacted by who? Your sister-in-law. She said you were suffering from dementia and could be a danger to yourself. She has a doctor's note. Christina beat me to the punch here too. In the eyes of the police, I was no longer a victim, but an escaped mental patient. Officer, this certificate is fake. I've never been to Dr. Phillips. That's a serious charge. Do you have evidence of forgery? Of course I don't. How could I prove I've never been to a doctor if I don't have any medical records? At that moment, two guards I know walked into the station. Crowell saw me and nodded to his partner. Mr. Coleman, we've been looking for you. You need to get back to the hospital. The officer on duty gave me a sympathetic look. Sir, I'd advise you not to resist. Get yourself checked out, and if there's nothing wrong with you, your problems will be solved. But I've already been examined. The doctor found no abnormalities. Then why haven't you been discharged? Crowell asked. I didn't have an answer to that question. Or I did, but no one wanted to hear it. I stood up and headed for the exit. Crowell made a motion to stop me, but the duty officer shook his head. The first thing I did was go looking for a job. Maybe someone would agree to take an elderly man on temporary work. Cleaning the yard, unloading goods, fixing something. But everywhere they demanded documents, which I didn't have. And when I explained the situation, suspicion appeared in the eyes of employers. Apparently, the story about my sister-in-law taking over the house sounded implausible. At the supermarket, the manager listened to my request for a job and shook his head. I'm sorry, sir, but we can't accept anyone without papers. Besides, we don't have any vacancies for people of your age. The fast food joint didn't even listen. They saw a gray-haired man in crumpled clothes and politely asked him to leave the premises. At the construction site, the foreman turned out to be more humane. Grandpa, I would love to help, but the work is hard, and you can't do it without insurance. If something happens, there will be problems. By evening, it was clear that I couldn't find a job. I bought bread and milk at a convenience store with the rest of my money and went to look for a place to sleep. The park where the guards had caught me during the day seemed the most suitable. There were benches, trees for shelter from the wind, and most importantly, few people in the dark. I found a secluded spot between the bushes and tried to make myself comfortable. The night was excruciating. Every rustle made me wary. What if it was the guards again? Or vagrants, who would not be happy about a competitor? The cold penetrated me, and by morning I woke up with a stiffness in my body. Dawn found me on a bench by the pond. Weekdays were beginning, and joggers and dog walkers were streaming into the park. I realized that I wouldn't stay on the bench for long. Sooner or later, someone would call the police to report a suspicious vagrant. I spent the day in the library. It was warm, quiet, and no one asked any questions of an elderly man reading newspapers. But by evening, the library was closing, and the problem of a night's lodging arose again. I decided to try a bus stop on the outskirts of town. There was a glass booth with a bench inside, not particularly comfortable, but protected from the wind. Besides, buses ran 24 hours a day, though rarely, so my presence wouldn't look suspicious. The second night went a little better than the first. I dozed intermittently, awakened by the roar of passing trucks or the occasional night bus. At 3 in the morning, a police patrol came up to me. "Everything all right, sir?" the young officer asked. "Waiting for the morning bus," I lied. "I see. Just be careful. Sometimes drug addicts congregate here." They left, but I couldn't sleep. I sat there thinking about how quickly a person can hit rock bottom. 3 days ago, I had a house, a bank account, the respect of my neighbors. Now I was hiding from the police at the bus stop and didn't know where to get money for food. In the morning, I went to look for work again, but the result was the same. Without documents, no one wanted to even talk to me. At the Social Assistance Center, I was given a coupon for a free lunch, but I was warned that such vouchers are issued no more than 3 per person per week. While waiting in line for food, I met other homeless people. Most of them were much younger than me, people who had lost their jobs, veterans with PTSD, drug addicts. But there was also one elderly man in his 70s named Frank. "How long have you been on the street?" he asked, munching on some unpalatable soup. "Third day," I answered. "The first time is the hardest. Then you get used to it. I've had it for 2 years now." "What happened?" "My wife died, my kids live in other states, couldn't make the payments on the house, so the bank foreclosed. And at my age, they don't rent. Who needs an old dick with no proof of income?" Frank's story was frightening in its ordinariness. It turns out that it's very easy to turn into a tramp. All it takes is a few unfortunate circumstances. Where do you spend the night? In summer, in the park? In winter, in the shelter? When there are places. But the best place is a train station or a hospital. It's warm and the guards don't chase you if you're quiet. Frank told me a few useful things about life on the street, where you can wash for free, which stores throw away expired but still edible food, how to look respectable so as not to attract the attention of the police, knowledge I never thought I'd need. I spent the third night in the hospital emergency room, citing chest pains. The nurse took my blood pressure. It had really spiked from the stress, and let me sit in the hallway until morning. It was the best place I had been all 3 days. It was warm, had a toilet and drinking water. In the morning, the doctor found that my heart was relatively fine and politely asked me to make room. I went outside feeling every cell in my body protesting against this existence. On the fourth day, I tried to contact Robert through his office. The receptionist was polite, but said that communication with business travelers was intermittent and promised to relay the message when she had a chance. I left the library's phone number and asked for an urgent callback. There was no call. The day stretched on endlessly. I wandered the streets, went into stores to warm myself, sat in the library. By evening, I was exhausted. The constant tension, cold, and poor nutrition were taking their toll. The fourth night I spent again at the bus stop, but now it felt almost like home, at least familiar and predictable. I wrapped myself in the newspapers I'd found in the trash can and tried to fall asleep to the monotonous noise of the night highway. In my dream, I dreamed of Ellen. She sat in our garden among the roses and shook her head reproachfully. "Henry, why did you do that? You should have been better prepared for old age." I didn't think Christina was capable of such a thing. I justified myself in my sleep. "I told you she was self-serving. Remember how she counted our money when I was sick?" Ellen was right. Christine was always a little more interested in our financial affairs than a daughter-in-law should be. But I chalked it up to practicality and concern for the family's future. I woke up to someone shaking my shoulder. It was dawn, and standing over me was the driver of the early bus, a middle-aged man with a concerned face. "Grandpa, are you okay? Are you alive? Because I thought—" "I'm fine," I whimpered, barely able to open my eyes. "Can I help you? Can I take you to the hospital?" "I'm fine, thanks. I'll get up and go." The driver shook his head sympathetically and went to his bus, and I stayed sitting on the cold bench, realizing that a little more of this life, and really will be in the hospital, but not temporarily. The fifth day outside began with rain. Small drops turned into a downpour by the time I reached the city center. My soaked clothes were sticking to my body, and my shoes were squelching with water. The window of the watch store reflected a strange man, gaunt, with sunken cheeks and dull eyes. In 5 days, I had aged 10 years. In the library, the caretaker, an elderly woman with glasses, looked at me with sympathy. "Sir, maybe you should go to the homeless center. There are showers there, dry clothes." "Thank you, I'll be fine," I replied, but my voice was shaking from the cold. She didn't say anything else, but brought a towel and hot coffee from the service cupboard. Such simple kindness almost made me cry. Apparently, my nerves were already on edge. I spent the morning in the reading room, warming up and drying my clothes. There was a column of job ads in the local newspaper. Maybe something suitable had come up during those days. But all the offers required either documents or special training, or were aimed at young people. Around noon, the rain stopped, and I decided to take a walk around my neighborhood. I wanted to look at the house to see if it was still standing. It's a strange feeling to miss your own place, watching it from afar like a museum piece. As I approached a familiar street, I saw a furniture company truck outside the house. Two workers were taking out my old bed, the same bed I'd slept on for the last 30 years, where Ellen had died. They were loading it into the truck carelessly, like old junk that needed to be put away soon. My heart clenched painfully. I hid behind a neighbor's fence and watched. The bed was followed by my desk, the bookshelf I had made myself, and Ellen's chair with its faded upholstery. Our whole life was becoming a pile of unnecessary furniture. In the evening, I returned to my bus stop. It had become almost a home during those days, the only permanent place in my new homeless life. I knew the bus schedule by heart, got used to the noise of passing cars, even made friends with the local cats, who sometimes warmed up next to me on particularly cold nights. As I settled down on the bench, I tried to analyze the situation soberly. It had been 6 days, and Robert hadn't responded to a single message. Either the connection was really bad, or something had happened to him, or he didn't want to get involved in the conflict. The third option seemed the most painful. What if Robert really does think a nursing home is the best solution for me? What if the whole business trip thing was just made up to avoid an uncomfortable conversation? Maybe he and Christine had planned the whole thing together, and now they were waiting for me to give in and agree to their terms. The night was particularly cold. I woke up a few times from tooth to tooth. By morning, my fever had risen, and the cold must have gotten to me. I felt dizzy when I got up from the bench. In the reflection of the bus stop glass, I saw a frightening picture. The feverish glint in my eyes, the bluish color of my lips, the tremors in my hands. If this went on, Mildred would be right. I would indeed die in the street. On the 7th day, I hardly got up from the bench. My strength was failing me, and it was getting harder and harder to breathe. Passers-by looked warily at the strange old man who sat at the bus stop all day long without getting on any buses. One driver even asked, "Grandpa, can I help you? Maybe a ride to the hospital?" "No, thank you," I wheezed. "I'm waiting for the bus." "What bus? I've been riding here for 5 hours and you're still sitting here." "The long-distance bus. The long-distance bus." The driver shrugged his shoulders and drove off, and I continued to sit, feeling the life slowly draining out of me. The coughing got worse and there was a sharp pain in my chest. I guess Mildred was right about the pneumonia. By the evening of the 7th day, I could hardly keep my head straight. My thoughts were jumbled and my eyes swam in black spots. Maybe tomorrow I wouldn't wake up on this bench, and Christina would finally win. Get rid of me without staining her hands. I wonder what she'll tell Robert when he gets back. Probably that I died in a nursing home of old age and disease. Or maybe she'll make up a story about an accident. I fell, hit my head, my aching heart couldn't take it. Robert will cry at the funeral and live in peace in the house he inherited. The night was foggy and especially cold. I wrapped myself in old newspapers I found in the trash can and tried to sleep. But sleep didn't come. Coughing and chest pains interfered. By morning, I finally realized that I would not last long. The 8th day began with the fact that I lost consciousness right on the bench. I woke up to someone shaking me insistently by the shoulders. The voice sounded worried, almost panicked. But through the fog of consciousness, I couldn't make out the words. My eyelids felt leaden, and it was excruciatingly difficult to open my eyes. When I was finally able to focus my eyes, a familiar face was leaning over me. "Dad? Dad, it's me. What happened to you?" Robert looked tanned and tired from his business trip. His dark hair was disheveled and his shirt was wrinkled from driving all night. But now his face was so horrified that I tried to sit up straighter. "Robert, you're back? My God, how did you get here? What have they done to you?" He put his arms around me and I felt his hands. His hands were trembling. 8 days on the street must have made me a frightening sight, dirty, gaunt, sick. "Christina," I wheezed. "She kicked me out of the house. She changed the locks." "What?" Robert pulled away and scrutinized my face. "What are you talking about?" I tried to tell the whole story, but my voice broke into a cough every now and then. Robert listened in silence, and his expression grew darker and darker. When I got to the part about fake medical certificates and forced hospitalization, he jumped up from the bench. 8 days? You've been living here for 8 days. Where am I supposed to live? I've been declared incompetent. The guards have been catching all over the city. Robert ran his hand through his hair. a gesture I knew from his childhood. It was what he did when he was angry but trying to control himself. Dad, I didn't get any messages. I didn't know anything. The connection was really bad. But if I'd gotten a single word about what was going on, Christina told me that you agreed to my moving into a nursing home. That's a lie. I never. He paused, looking at my condition. Oh my God. You need medical attention. We're going to the hospital right now. No, they'll try to put me away again. They have fake certificates. Dad, I'm with you. Nobody's going to put you away. Robert helped me to the car. Every movement was difficult. My legs were buckling. My chest was wheezing and gurgling. My son looked shocked, probably only now realizing the state in which he'd found me. Let's go home first, he said, starting the engine. We'll deal with this mess, and then we'll go to the doctor. The drive home took 10 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. Familiar streets, familiar houses, everything looked the same, but I was looking at it through thick glass. Was it really only a week ago that I was part of this world? The car stopped on my front porch. Robert got out first and walked determinedly toward the front door. I followed, barely able to keep up. The bell rang sharply in the morning silence. Patricia opened the door a minute later, wearing an expensive robe. When she saw Robert, she smiled happily at first, but then she saw me and her face turned sour. Robert, darling, it's so good to have you back. Don't let that man in the house. He's sick and dangerous. This man is my father, Robert said quietly, and this is his house. But Christina said, where is Christine? Still asleep. Robert, you don't understand. Your father is mentally ill. We were acting in his best interest. Robert pushed Patricia away and went into the house. I followed, feeling like a ghost who'd returned to his former home. The furnishings had changed dramatically. New furniture, new paintings on the walls. Even the smell was different. Expensive perfume instead of the lavender scent Hélène loved. Christine, Robert shouted. Come here at once. There was a rustling sound from the bedroom, and then Christine appeared in a silk nightgown. Her hair was disheveled, and her face showed traces of makeup. When she saw her husband, she was confused, but quickly pulled herself together. Robert, what a surprise! I wasn't expecting you so early. What's going on here? Robert's voice was icy cold. Why has my father been living on the street for 8 days? On the street? What are you talking about? Your father is in a specialized facility, receiving skilled nursing care. He was lying unconscious at a bus stop. Robert exploded. Look at him. He's barely alive. Christine took a quick look at me from head to toe, and something like satisfaction flashed in her eyes. Apparently, I looked as she expected. Robert, calm down. Your father has serious mental problems. He escaped from the medical center. We've been looking for him, but... Lies, I shouted, but my voice broke into a cough. She kicked me out. She changed the locks. You see? Patricia turned to her son. He's delusional, making up stories. We did change the locks for his safety when he became aggressive. Robert slowly looked around the living room. His attention was caught by the new expensive clothes, the lack of family photos, the complete change of furnishings. What's this? He asked, pointing to a leather sofa that cost at least $3,000. We redecorated, Christina replied hastily. The old furniture was in a terrible state, unsanitary. With what money? I didn't authorize you to spend the family savings. I have a power of attorney to handle your father's financial affairs. It's legitimate. Robert came right up to Christine. He was a head taller than his wife, and now he was taking full advantage. Show me that power of attorney. It's in the safe. Now! Christine licked her lips nervously and walked over to the desk, the new expensive one that had replaced my homemade oak desk. She rummaged through the drawers and pulled out a folder of papers. Robert scrutinized the papers, frowning harder and harder. When was this signed? 3 months ago. Your father asked for it. You're lying. Robert threw the papers on the floor. Dad would never sign something like that. And even if he did, that doesn't give you the right to kick him out of your own house. Robert, you don't understand the gravity of the situation, Patricia intervened. Why? Your father is a danger to himself and others. We have a medical report. From which doctor? Dr. Phillips, a very qualified specialist. Robert took out his cell phone and quickly dialed a number. Hello, directory assistants? I need the number of Dr. Phillips, who runs a private psychiatric practice in Bladensburg. What? There's no such doctor? Check again. Are you sure? He disconnected and looked at the women with an expression of icy contempt. Dr. Phillips does not exist. You falsified medical records. Christina and Patricia looked at each other. There was no longer confidence in their gazes, only fear of exposure. Robert, we can explain, Christine began in an ingratiating tone. We were really worried about your father. Shut up, he shouted with such force that I flinched. You drove a 73-year-old man to the point where he was dying in the street. You forged his papers. You stole his money. That's a crime. But we're a family, Patricia tried. We can find a compromise. What the hell kind of family? Robert grabbed Christine by the shoulders. Get out of this house, now, both of you. Robert, this is our house, too, Christina objected. I'm your wife. Not anymore. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. And damages. And fraud. Christina's face is dead pale. You can't. We have joint assets. We don't share anything. The house belonged to my parents. I just let you live here. The money you stole was my father's pension. You're going to have to answer for everything. Patricia tried to take the initiative. Young man, calm down. We'll find a reasonable solution. There's only one solution for you, Robert interrupted her. You pack your things and get out. You have half an hour. But we have nowhere to go, Christine wailed. I have no other money, no apartment. They should have thought of that earlier when they threw the sick old man out on the street. Robert turned to me. Dad, sit down. They'll clean up now, and we'll take care of your health. I sank down on the new couch, feeling strange in the change house. Christina and Patricia fidgeted with packing, whispering and casting angry glances in our direction. Sometimes Christina tried to say something to her husband, but he defiantly ignored her. 40 minutes later, they were standing at the front door with their suitcases. Christina made one last attempt. Robert, think about what you're doing. We've been married for 5 years. 5 years of a mistake, he replied coldly. I'm correcting it now. The door slammed behind them and the house was silent. Robert turned to me. Papa, I'm sorry. If I had known... You couldn't have known, I wheezed. She had it all figured out. Let's go to the hospital. You need a doctor. I nodded. My strength was wearing off, the adrenaline of the contraction wearing off, and only fatigue remained. But for the first time in 8 days, I wasn't afraid of doctors and hospitals. Robert was by my side and no one else could control my fate without my consent. I was kept in the hospital for 3 days. The pneumonia was serious, but the doctors dealt with it quickly. Apparently, my body had not given up yet. Robert stayed in my room on the phone, dealing with the fallout of what Christine had done. Bank accounts, forged documents, medical certificates. All of it took time and nerves to fix. On the 4th day, I was discharged home. The house looked strange. New furniture juxtaposed with old things Christine hadn't had time to throw away or sell. Robert tried to restore the furnishings, but much was irretrievably lost. Ellen's photos, my tools, her favorite books, all gone. Dad, I found boxes of your things in the garage, Robert said, bringing out another cardboard box. Apparently, they were going to throw them away. Among the junk, I found a picture of the wedding, of Ellen and me, young and happy, unaware of the trials of life. Christine hadn't dared to destroy it, but had hidden it far away so that it wouldn't be a nuisance. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Robert went to open it, and I heard Christine's familiar voice. Robert, I need to talk to you. Alone. We have nothing to talk about. Please just give me 5 minutes. I can explain everything. The son hesitated. Despite everything that had happened, 5 years of marriage had not gone unnoticed. He finally let her into the house but remained standing in the hallway, making it clear that the visit would be short. Christina looked confused and tired. Her expensive suit was wrinkled and her hair had lost its flawlessness. 3 days of motel life had taken its toll on her appearance. Robert, I know you're angry, but I need you to listen to me, please. I'm listening. Mom and I were really worried about your father. He'd become forgetful, absent-minded. We were afraid that he might hurt himself or forget to turn something on. And that's why you forged the medical certificates. Christina strayed from her prepared speech. No, of course not. I mean, We just wanted to speed things up. Bureaucracy is so slow and time was of the essence. Time for what? To sell the house? We weren't going to sell the house. She was indignant. We wanted to buy a smaller apartment for your father and set up a normal family life in this house. For us, for our future children. Robert grinned. Our children. Christine, we've been married for 5 years and you've never once talked about children. Only about career, money, and prestige. People change, she said quietly. I was ready to change my priorities. After you get rid of my father? Robert, think straight. Your father is an old man. He needs constant care. We're young. We have our whole lives ahead of us. Isn't it logical to find him a place where he can be professionally cared for? I listened to this conversation from the living room and marveled at Christine's skill in turning the facts around. In her words, cruelly putting a sick person out on the street was transformed into a concern for his well-being. It would have been logical to discuss it with me, Robert replied coldly, not forge documents and force hospitalization. Nefarni, we tried to call you, but the connection was bad. You lied to the operator that I said yes. I checked the call records. Christina went silent. Apparently, she hadn't expected Robert to check everything so thoroughly. Okay, she said finally. I admit we overstepped our authority, but our motives were honorable. We meant well. You wanted the house and the money, Robert said tiredly. Stop lying, Christina. I saw how much you spent on new furniture. It wasn't for the old man's medical expenses. The furniture was a necessity. The old one was falling apart. The old furniture was made by my father's hands. It was stronger than this plastic junk you bought. Christina realized that the direct approach wasn't working and changed tactics. Her voice softened. Tears welled up in her eyes. Robert, I love you. Yes, I've made mistakes, but doesn't love give you the right to forgive? We can make things right, start over. Love? He interjected. You threw my sick father out on the street? You call that love? He's not your real father, Christine blurted out. There was dead silence. Robert slowly turned to his wife. What did you say? Christine realized that she had said too much and tried to correct herself. I meant that he wasn't my father, so it made it easier for me to make the hard decisions. No, you said, not your birth father. What did you mean by that? It was just a slip of the tongue. But Robert wasn't listening. He came into the living room to see me. Dad, be honest. Am I adopted? I didn't say anything for a long time. It was a secret I'd kept for 34 years, and I'd hoped to take it to my grave. But after everything that had happened, Robert had a right to know the truth. Yes, I said quietly. Ellen and I adopted you when you were 2 years old. Your mother died of an overdose. There was no father. Ellen couldn't have children. And you never saw fit to tell me? Ellen was afraid you'd feel like an outsider. And I just loved you like my own son. Robert sank into a chair, digesting the news. Christina took advantage of the pause. You see, you're not even his own son. Why would you sacrifice your life for a stranger? Robert slowly raised his head and looked at his wife. There was such hatred in his eyes that Christina involuntarily backed away. A stranger? He said quietly. This man raised me for 32 years, taught me how to ride a bike, helped me with math, sat by my bedside when I was sick. And you consider him a stranger? Robert, that's not what I meant. That's exactly what you meant. He got up and went to the door. Get out of my house now. But I have nowhere to go. My mom's renting a motel room. I've spent all my savings on lawyers. That's not my problem. Robert, we can work this out. I'll pay you back the money. I'll apologize to your father. Too late. That's when Patricia's voice came from outside. Christine, stop humiliating yourself. Come out at once. Christina rushed to the window and saw her mother standing by the gate. Patricia was furious, face red, fists clenched. Mom says she has a plan, Christina said. We're not going to give up so easily. What plan? Robert was wary. We're going to sue to have your father declared incompetent. We have witnesses to his inappropriate behavior, medical evidence. Kiwilorn, fake testimony. Who's going to prove it's fake? Mom knows people in the medical community. We'll find a real doctor who can backdate the diagnosis. Robert grabbed Christine by the arm and dragged her out. That's it. This conversation is over. Let go of me. You're making a mistake. He pushed her over the threshold and slammed the door shut. But through the door, he could hear the mother and daughter talking. Stupid girl, Patricia hissed. Oh, Rajan, why did you have to humiliate yourself in front of that boy? We can manage without him. Mom, maybe we should back off. They could sue us. Let them sue us. I have connections in social services. We'll get the old man declared incompetent by the authorities. And then we'll demand compensation for moral damages. We've been thrown out on the street. But how do we prove it? Some. We'll find witnesses who can corroborate Henry's erratic behavior. Neighbors saw him looking for his keys in the bushes, forgetting to turn off the stove. A competent defense attorney will present these as symptoms of dementia. The voices drifted away, but the overall plan was clear. Patricia was not going to give up and was preparing for a long legal war. Robert returned to the living room with a grim face. Dad, they won't just back down. I get it. What are we going to do? Mom, I'm going to see a lawyer tomorrow. I'm filing for divorce, damages, document fraud. Let them defend, not attack. He's sitting next to me. Dad, about the adoption. It doesn't change anything. You're my father, the only father I know. Thank you, son. We can handle these witches. All they have is lies and arrogance, and we have the truth. I wanted to believe in his optimism, but life had taught me caution. Patricia was more cunning and evil than I thought. And if she really has connections in health and social services, it's going to be a tough fight. It was getting dark outside the window. Robert was cooking dinner in the kitchen, and I sat in the chair and looked at the picture with Ellen. I wondered what she would say about all this. Probably wouldn't have been surprised. She hadn't trusted Christina from the beginning. The phone rang around 10 o'clock at night. Robert answered, and I heard his strained voice. Hello? Who's speaking? I see. No, my father is home and feeling fine. Who reported it? I see. No, there's no need to check. Okay, if you insist, come tomorrow morning. He hung up and turned to me. Social services. We've received a report that an elderly man is living in unsanitary conditions and needs help. They're coming tomorrow to check on him. Patricia acted faster than we expected. In the morning, I woke up in my bed for the first time in 2 weeks. It was a strange feeling, lying under a familiar ceiling, seeing the familiar shape of furniture, hearing Robert fiddling in the kitchen. But there was no complete relief. 8 days outside had left a mark not only on her body, but also on her soul. Every sound outside the window made me wary. What if it was the guards or social workers again? Robert brought breakfast on a tray. Oatmeal, toast, hot tea. He cared for me as if I were seriously ill, but there was tension in his movements. We both realized that what had happened had changed something between us, but neither of us wanted to discuss it. How are you feeling? He asked, setting the tray on the bedside table. Better, thank you. The doctor said I should stay home for another week to recuperate. I nodded even though I knew it wasn't just physical. My trust in the world was shattered. If my own family was capable of such betrayal, what could I expect? Robert sat down in the chair by the bed. It was obvious that he wanted to say something, but he didn't know how to start. Dad, there's something I need to find out. About the power of attorney you supposedly signed? You really don't remember signing anything? Absolutely not. I would never authorize Christina to handle my money. Then it's a forgery, but it's very high quality. The handwriting's almost identical. The lawyer says it'll be hard to prove forgery. It'll take forensics. He took his cell phone out of his pocket and showed me a photo of the document. Look carefully at the signature. Maybe you can remember when you could have signed on a similar document? I studied the image. The signature was indeed very similar to mine, but there was something subtly alien about it. Too neat or something. My handwriting had always been sprawling, but here every letter was carefully written. It's not my signature, I said confidently, but it's similar, very similar. Christina could have practiced copying your handwriting for a long time. She had plenty of time and samples, checks, memos, documents. The idea that Christina spent months preparing for this deception was particularly painful. So the plan to get rid of me had been brewing for a long time, and I hadn't suspected a thing. Robert, I said gently, It's not your fault what happened. He looked up sharply. How could it not be my fault? I married that woman. I brought her into our home. I let her run the place while I was away on business. You couldn't have known. I did. He got up and started pacing the room. Elaine warned me about Christine. She said she had a vested interest, that she was counting our assets. I didn't listen. I thought Mom was just jealous. It was true. Ellen really didn't trust Christina from the beginning. I remember her whispering to me in the kitchen, Henry, that girl is looking at our house like it's a tidbit. But we both didn't want to ruin things with our son. Ellen wanted you to be happy, I said. If she'd known Christina was like that. She knew. Robert stopped at the window. Mom was always a good psychologist. I was blind. Fell in love with a pretty face and career ambition. Why did you marry her? He was silent for a long time, looking out into the garden where Ellen's roses had once grown. Probably because she was the complete opposite of everything we had. Home, family traditions, a quiet, measured life. It all seemed boring to me after university. Christina was bright, modern, ambitious. I thought that was exactly what I needed. And what changed? Time. I realized that brightness isn't necessarily depth. That ambition can be creative as well as destructive. That family traditions exist for a reason. They protect against loneliness. He turned to me. Dad, when Mom died, I felt lost. Christina seemed supportive, but not in the right way. She said the right words, but there was no warmth in them. And you were just there for me. Didn't try to comfort me with empty phrases. Didn't demand that I pull myself together. You just were. We were both going through a loss. Yeah, and we had to stick together. And I went away on business trips, left you with those predators. There was a pain in his voice that made me feel sorry for my son. Guilt is a hard thing to feel, especially when it's justified. Robert, you can't change the past. The important thing is that you came back in time. In time? He grinned bitterly. You almost died at the bus stop. If only I'd stayed another day. The thought haunted us both. Indeed, another 24 hours on the street and there would have been nothing to talk about. Outside the window, there was the sound of a car. Robert looked out and frowned. Social services. They'd come to check the unsanitary conditions. He went out to meet the officials, and I tried to clean myself up. I needed to look like a well-groomed man, not the hobo I'd been yesterday. A few minutes later, a woman in her 40s in a business suit entered the room. She was followed by Robert with a grim face. Mr. Coleman, I'm Janet Wilson, social worker. We got a call that you needed help. Who made the call? Anonymously. But the description of the situation was quite detailed. A lonely elderly man in a dilapidated house. Signs of dementia. I looked around the bedroom. Robert had done his best to tidy up. Bed made, things organized, medications in a prominent place. As you can see, I'm not alone. My son lives with me. I understand. But the call came in a week ago when your son was on a business trip. Chun, a week ago, I was forcibly removed from my home, I said bluntly. They changed the locks and made me live on the street. Janet Wilson raised her eyebrows in surprise. Who kicked you out? My sister-in-law and her mother. They wanted to take possession of the house while the son was away. Those are serious allegations. Do you have proof? Robert showed her a file of documents. Forged power of attorney, bogus medical certificates, illegal lock changes. My lawyer has already prepared a statement of claim. The social worker scrutinized the papers. It's an unusual case indeed, but I'm more interested in your current condition, Mr. Coleman. How are you feeling? Recovering from the pneumonia I contracted on the street. And mentally, have you had any problems with memory, orientation? I realize that's a key question. My answer will determine whether Patricia and Christina will believe me. My memory is fine. My orientation is fine. I can give you any dates, addresses, phone numbers. Janet Wilson asked a few simple questions. Date, day of the week, name of the president. I answered without hesitation. No cognitive impairment, she said. And who's your attending physician? Dr. Harrington at City Hospital. He examined me yesterday. May I contact him to confirm? Sure. She made some notes in her notebook. Mr. Coleman, I need to inspect the house. Make sure the living conditions are sanitary. For the next half an hour, Janet Wilson walked around the rooms, looked in the refrigerator, checked the bathroom and toilet. Robert made sure everything looked decent, but I could see how tense he was watching her reaction. The house is in good condition, she finally concluded. Cleanliness is maintained, food is fresh, medications are available. I don't see any irregularities. So the signal was a false alarm? It would seem so, or the situation's changed dramatically in a week. She packed up her paperwork and headed out the door. Mr. Coleman, if you have any problems or need assistance, please contact us. We're always here to help. Thank you. As the social services car disappeared around the corner, Robert returned to the house with visible relief. It's gone, but it's only the beginning. Patricia won't stop. I know, she's vindictive and persistent. We sat in the living room, each of us thinking about something else. The tension of the last few days was beginning to take its toll. I was tired and Robert looked exhausted. Dad, he said suddenly, do you forgive me? For what? For not protecting you. For marrying Christine. For leaving you alone with those women. I looked at my son for a long time. I could see the guilt, the fatigue, the pain in his face. He blamed himself more than he should have. Robert, you didn't have to know what your wife was capable of. Some people can hide their true nature for a long time. But Mother saw. She warned me. Mama was a woman, and women are more sensitive to these things. You're a man. You looked at Christine with different eyes. So you forgive her? I forgive, but I don't know if I can forget. The third day after we got home, I got a call from Tom Bradford, a neighbor who lived 3 houses down from us. Robert picked up the phone, and after a short conversation, hung up with a concerned look. What's wrong? I asked. Tom wants to talk. He says there's a strange rumor going around the neighborhood. Half an hour later, Tom came to our house. He looked awkward, as if he didn't know how to start the conversation. Henry, Robert, I hate to discuss this, but I think you should know. There are rumors circulating in the neighborhood that Henry has serious health problems. What kind of rumors? Robert tensed. They say he has senile dementia, that he's become violent, a danger to others. Mrs. Parker says she's seen him wandering the streets looking strange, talking to himself. I recalled 8 days of homelessness. Indeed, neighbors could see me in a bad way, disheveled in dirty clothes, poorly oriented from fatigue and illness. And who is spreading these rumors? Robert asked. Mrs. Patricia Henderson originally. She'd go door to door telling neighbors about her worries about Henry. Said the family tried to get him to get treatment, but he refused and became uncontrollable. And people believe this nonsense? Tom shifted uncomfortably from foot to foot. You see, Robert, a lot of people remember the incidents of the last few months. Henry had indeed been forgetting to turn off the stove, looking for his keys in the bushes. Patricia presented these as symptoms of illness. But they're just random accidents. Of course they are. But when they are put together and presented from a certain angle, I understood Patricia's logic. She was taking real facts and interpreting them in the right light. Instead of making up stories, she used the truth, but in a distorted way. Tom, what exactly are the neighbors saying? Various things. Mrs. Collins claims you tried to enter her house thinking it was yours. Mr. Jones says he saw you at the bus stop several days in a row. Said you sat there from morning till night without getting on any bus. That's true, I admitted. But not because I'm crazy, but because I had nowhere else to go. I understand. But most of the neighbors don't know the whole story. They've only been told one version, that you have dementia and your family has been trying to help you. Robert stood up and started pacing the room. So while we were recovering from the hospital, they were actively shaping public opinion. I guess so, and that's not all. Patricia contacted a doctor at a private hospital, Dr. Elizabeth Morgan. She agreed to give an opinion on Henry's condition based on eyewitness accounts. What do you mean based on eyewitness accounts? She didn't even examine me. Patricia explained that you were refusing a medical exam because you were sick. Dr. Morgan specializes in age psychiatry and has experience with involuntary patients. Robert stopped in front of Tom. And what does this doctor's report say? Preliminary diagnosis, moderate dementia with elements of aggressive behavior. Recommendation: compulsory hospitalization for an in-depth examination. Sorry to compromise, but that's illegal. You can't make a diagnosis without seeing the patient. In emergency cases, you can, if there's a threat to the patient or others. And the neighbor's testimony paints exactly that picture. I felt an icy chill spreading through my chest. Patricia wasn't just a mean old woman, she was a master strategist. While we were rejoicing in our victory, she was methodically preparing another attack. Tom, do any of the neighbors support this theory? A lot of people are hesitant. They've known you a long time. They know there's something wrong with this story. But there are some who believe it, especially Mrs. Parker. She's always been a gossip. And the new tenants at number 23, they don't really know you. And Mildred Harris, I asked. Mildred's on your side. She's tried to explain to people what's really going on, but not many people listen to her. They say she's too emotionally involved. Robert sat back in his chair. So we need to somehow disprove these rumors. That's going to be difficult, Tom warned. People tend to believe the bad more than the good. And the story of the cruel daughter-in-law sounds too dramatic for many people. But we have proof. Forged documents, records of calls to the security service. It's all legal technicalities. What's important to regular people is what they saw with their own eyes. And they saw Henry in a strange state. Tom left, promising to keep us posted on the situation. Robert immediately called the lawyer and outlined the new problem. So, Mr. Foster says libel is a separate cause of action, he said, ending the call. But proving it won't be easy. Patricia isn't technically lying. She's genuinely concerned about your health. And this Dr. Morgan's report? Also technically legal. If there are witnesses to inappropriate behavior, a doctor can give a preliminary opinion without an in-person examination. I realized I'd underestimated my opponent. Christina was greedy and stupid, but her mother was a different caliber. She knew how to use the system to her advantage. In the evening, Mildred came over. She looked upset and angry. Henry, what nonsense the neighbors are telling about you. I've been telling people it's all lies, but they won't listen to me. Mildred, don't worry. We'll get through this. But did you hear what Mrs. Parker says? She says you've been molesting her granddaughter, allegedly following her around and making lewd propositions. That was pretty low. Allegations of inappropriate behavior with young girls could have ruined my reputation. When did this allegedly happen? Robert asked. A week ago, while Henry was living on the street. You mean during a period of supposed dementia? Exactly. Patricia attributes it to disinhibition due to the disease. She says older men with dementia often become sexually inadequate. Robert went pale. If this goes any further, Dad could register as a potential sex offender. But that's nonsense, Mildred exclaimed. Henry never... Of course it's crazy, but who's going to look into it? The accusation was made. The witnesses were present. The medical evidence was available. I sat silent, stunned by the magnitude of the smear campaign. Patricia was attacking on all fronts. Mental health, social adequacy, even sexual safety. It wouldn't be long before I could be portrayed as a real monster. We need to act fast, Robert said. Tomorrow I go to a lawyer. We'll file a lawsuit for protection of honor and dignity, and at the same time organize a medical examination by independent doctors. And if the examination confirms any problems? Mildred asked cautiously. What problems? I was surprised. Well, the stress of the last few weeks could have affected her psyche. Post-traumatic stress disorder, depression. Robert looked at me carefully. Dad, do you really feel okay? Psychologically, I mean. I wondered, did I really feel the way I did before? The constant wariness, the distrust of people, the nightmares, all of that came after living on the streets. Maybe Patricia wasn't so far from the truth. I don't know, I admitted honestly. After everything that happened, I became more suspicious, more nervous. But it's a normal reaction to stress, not dementia. Of course it's normal, Mildred agreed hastily. Anyone would change after such an ordeal. But I could see the worry in her eyes. What if Patricia had succeeded in making everyone, including myself, question my sanity? The next day, Robert arranged a meeting with Dr. Harrington, my doctor. He conducted a detailed examination, not only physical, but also psychological. Mr. Coleman, you're showing signs of post-traumatic stress disorder, the doctor said after the examination. It's a natural reaction to the events you've experienced, but I don't see any symptoms of dementia or other serious mental disorders. Can you give me a written report? Of course. Moreover, I recommend that you see a psychiatrist, not because you are ill, but to officially confirm the absence of serious disorders. Robert wrote down the address of the specialist. What about Dr. Morgan's report? A diagnosis in absentia is not valid if the patient is willing to undergo a face-to-face evaluation, but the problem is that many people don't understand the difference between a provisional and a final diagnosis. Returning home, we stopped at the supermarket to get groceries. At the entrance, I ran into Mrs. Parker. When she saw me, she shrieked and recoiled. "Stay away from me," she said loudly. "I know you're sick." Several shoppers turned around at the noise. Robert tried to explain the situation, but Mrs. Parker kept shouting, "This man needs to be treated. He's a danger to children. We had to leave without buying anything." On the way home, I reflected on the power of rumors. A few weeks of active campaigning was enough to turn me from a respectable man to a potential maniac in the eyes of my neighbors. "Dad, don't pay any attention to that fool," Robert said. "It'll all be cleared up soon." "And what if it doesn't? What if our reputation is lost forever? Then we'll move somewhere else. We start over." But I knew at my age, starting over was almost impossible. Blydendsburg had been my home for 40 years. Ellen's graves, memories of a happy family life. To leave was to admit defeat. That evening, Foster's lawyer called. He said that Patricia had filed a counterclaim to declare me incompetent. Evidence included testimony from neighbors and Dr. Morgan's report. "The trial is scheduled for next week," Foster said. "We need to prepare counter-arguments and find witnesses who will testify to your sanity. And if the judge believes their story, then you'll be declared incompetent and a guardian will be appointed. Guess who's up for that role? Christina, of course." The circle was closing. Even after the divorce, she could gain control of my life and property as a court-appointed guardian. I went to bed late, unable to fall asleep for a long time. The wind rumbled outside the window, and I thought it was Patricia setting new traps. The war was far from over. The Prince George's County Courthouse looked imposing and cold. Robert and I walked up the wide steps in the drizzling rain, and I felt my stomach clench with excitement. I'd lost even more weight in the 3 weeks of preparation for the trial. The nerves and sleeplessness were taking their toll. Attorney Foster met us at the entrance. He looked confident, but I could see the tension in his movements. The case wasn't easy. Technically, there was a whole system of documents and testimony working against us. "Henry, remember the most important thing? Answer clearly. Don't let yourself get emotional," he instructed as he walked. "Christine and her lawyer will provoke you, trying to show you inadequate behavior." Christina and Patricia were already sitting in the courtroom with their representative, a thin man in an expensive suit. Christina was dressed modestly, almost mournfully, her hair swept back, her makeup minimal. The role of the suffering wife, forced to defend herself against unjust accusations. Patricia, on the other hand, looked belligerent. She was whispering something to her daughter, occasionally casting angry glances in our direction. Several witnesses sat next to them. I recognized Mrs. Parker, Dr. Morgan, and 2 other strangers. Judge Roland Campbell was a man in his 60s with a tired but attentive face. He listened to the case and announced that the question of capacity would be heard first, and then the property claims. "The plaintiff has the floor," the judge announced. Patricia and Christina's attorney rose and began to give their version of events. According to him, I suffered from progressive dementia, showed aggression, was a threat to myself and others. My family tried to talk me into treatment, but I refused and eventually became so out of control that emergency measures had to be taken. "Your Honor, this is a classic case of senile dementia in denial. Mr. Coleman is in need of guardianship and skilled nursing care." Dr. Morgan then took the stand. She read her report based on the accounts of neighbors and relatives. Progressive dementia, elements of aggressive and sexually inappropriate behavior, need for involuntary hospitalization. "Dr. Morgan," the judge interjected, "did you personally examine Mr. Coleman?" "No, Your Honor. The patient absolutely refused to be examined, which in itself is a symptom of illness." "I see. Proceed." The next witness was Mrs. Parker. She vividly described my strange behavior over the last few months. Forgetfulness, disorientation, inappropriate behavior with her granddaughter. He followed Emma when she came home from school, she said in a shaky voice. Asha making obscene gestures, trying to talk. The girl was afraid to walk past his house. I listened to these lies and felt rage boiling inside me. But Foster put his hand on my shoulder, reminding me of the need for self-control. The testimony of other witnesses was in the same vein. I was allegedly wandering the streets in an inadequate state, trying to enter other people's houses, behaving aggressively with passers-by. All this happened during the 8 days I was homeless, but none of the witnesses mentioned the true cause of my condition. The defendant has the floor, the judge said. Foster stood up and methodically began to break down the allegations. He presented medical reports from 3 independent specialists attesting to my capacity. He showed a forged power of attorney and a fictitious certificate from a non-existent Dr. Phillips. Your Honor, we have a case of fraud and duress. Mr. Coleman was the victim of a well-planned scam to take his property. He then called defense witnesses. Mildred Harris recounted the story of being kicked out of her home as she tried to help. Dr. Harrington confirmed there were no signs of dementia. Tom Bradford described Patricia's campaign to discredit me. Mr. Coleman, the judge turned to me, do you wish to testify? I stood up, feeling my knees shake. The courtroom froze in anticipation. Your Honor, I want to tell you what really happened. For the next half an hour, I told my version of events, how Christina and Patricia systematically prepared the seizure of the house, how I was deprived of my documents and money by deceit, how I was forced to live on the street. I spoke calmly, trying not to show emotion, though I was seething inside. Mr. Coleman, the opposing counsel interrupted me when it was time for cross-examination. Are you claiming that your sister-in-law forged your signature on the power of attorney? Yes, but forensics showed that the handwriting matches yours 93% of the time. How do you explain that? Christina had practiced copying my signature for a long time. She had plenty of samples. Or did you just forget you were signing a document? What's common with memory impairment? I distinctly remember never signing that power of attorney. Do you remember? Do you remember forgetting to turn off the stove? That was one time. Do you remember looking for your keys in the bushes? The keys fell. Do you remember molesting an underage girl? Sure you. I never molested anyone, I exploded. Your Honor, we note the defendant's aggressive response, the lawyer said caustically. Foster objected immediately, but the residue remained. The other side skillfully provoked me to emotional reactions that could be interpreted as signs of inadequacy. Christina was called in for questioning next. She held herself with dignity, answering calmly and thoroughly. According to her, the decision to change the locks was forced. I had become a danger to myself and others. We were very worried about Henry, she said with tears in her eyes. But he absolutely refused to help. We were afraid he might hurt himself or hurt other people. Mrs. Coleman, Foster asked when it was his turn, you say you cared for your father-in-law, but then why did you spend his money on expensive furniture for yourself? The old furniture was in terrible condition. We wanted to create a safe and comfortable environment for Henry. Safe? By kicking him out on the street? We didn't kick him out. We tried to institutionalize him, but he escaped. And you spent 8 days searching hospitals and shelters? Christina hesitated. We appealed to all authorities. We have records of the security call, Foster said. You didn't ask for Henry to be found for help, but for involuntary hospitalization. Forced hospitalization because he wouldn't voluntarily agree to treatment. The interrogation went on for over an hour. Foster methodically demolished Christine's story, showing the contradictions in her testimony, but she held firm, finding a plausible explanation for each accusation. Patricia was even more convincing than her daughter. She pretended to be a caring grandmother trying to help a sick relative. She talked about the agony of making hard decisions, the pain of seeing a once respected man deteriorate. Your Honor, I understand that Henry is angry with us, she said, wiping away tears. Illness often makes people suspicious and aggressive, but we were only acting in his best interest. By the end of the day, I felt exhausted. A trial is a theater where not only the truth is important, but also the ability to present it. Christina and Patricia turned out to be quite good actresses. The judge adjourned until the next day. As I left the courtroom, I heard Patricia whispering to her daughter, "So far, everything is going well. The main thing is to hang in there until the end." The next day, the hearing continued. Foster presented additional evidence: phone records, bank statements, testimony from expert scribblers. Gradually, the picture of a well-planned fraud was being built up. The decisive moment was the performance of a young programmer who recovered deleted files from Christina's computer. Among them were drafts of forged documents and correspondence with dubious medical consultants. "Your Honor," Foster said triumphantly, "there is documentary evidence of deliberate deception." Christina's face went pale. Patricia tried to whisper something to the lawyer, but he only waved his hands. After a short deliberation, the judge ruled. The suit to declare me incompetent is dismissed. Christine is charged with fraud and forgery. Patricia is charged with slander and solicitation. The court orders the defendants to recover all stolen funds plus compensatory damages, Judge Campbell announced. Christina and Patricia left the courthouse under escort. Their lawyer mumbled something about filing an appeal, but it was clear they'd lost. Robert hugged me. "Dad, we won! It's over." But I didn't feel happy. Yes, justice had been served, but at what cost? My reputation was ruined. My health was ruined. My sanity was ruined. And most importantly, I realized that the world is much more cruel and unpredictable than it seemed before. On the way home, Robert tried to cheer me up. "Everything will be the same now. The neighbors will realize they were wrong. My reputation will be restored." "You think so?" "Of course I do. The truth always wins." I looked at my son, young, naive, believing in justice. And I realized that he too might betray me someday. Not maliciously, like Christine, but just out of stupidity or weakness. Life had taught me that I could only trust myself completely. "Robert," I said, "you're a good man, but I won't let anyone else control my destiny. No one." "Dad, what are you talking about?" "Tomorrow I'll make a new will and healthcare arrangements. It'll be decided by an independent lawyer, not my relatives." "But so are you." "I'm sorry, son, but lesson learned." Robert was offended, but he didn't say anything. And I looked out the window at the passing Bladensburg and thought that old age is not only illness and weakness, it's also wisdom bought at a high price, the wisdom of mistrust.